Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Preserving Families. We are so grateful for your support, for your comments, and for just being a loyal listener. We really do appreciate it. Last week, we talked a little bit about our church history trip. We kind of introduced that we're going to do next year. It's going to be so exciting. Year 2025, the first week of August. Next year, for Come Follow Me, we're studying church history and the Doctrine and Covenant. So it's going to be a great year to come experience the places where our church leaders walked, our early church leaders. It's going to be awesome. So we, again, want you to invite you to come join us if you can. It's going to be a great opportunity to bring your family, tell your friends and family, bring your extended family, bring your older teenagers, bring your young single adults, gather people that you want to share this experience with. We've had great experiences taking our teenagers to church history sites and extended family members, and there's just nothing like it. There's just such an incredible spirit there. If you want to grow your kid's testimony of Joseph Smith and the Restoration, come walk where he walked. You don't have to do that to have a testimony, but boy, it sure helps to be in those places. It
definitely amplifies it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So again, we're just inviting everyone. If you're interested, Mark, where can they find some more information?
Well, yeah. So I think what we're trying to do is just get kind of a rough count right now to see who is interested, to determine how many buses we'll probably take. But Preserving Families podcast at gmail.com is a place you could write us for more information. There's a website. It's called journeyings.org. And if you went to their church history trip for 2025, it will give you a lot more information. I think, Janie, one of the things that we've done as we've engaged and participated and led these church history tours in the past is it's been really important for us to land on those temple locations. And the last time we did that, we stopped in Philadelphia at that temple. We stopped at the Palmyra Temple. We even, of course, Kirtland, but we even stopped at the Indianapolis Temple on our way across that part of the country, making our way to Nauvoo in Missouri. Of course, the Nauvoo Temple and the Kansas City Temple, but we didn't go into any of those temples. We were kind of rushed for time. This year we've built in that we're going to be doing sessions in those temples along the way. Not all the ones I mentioned, because we're going to do just this first leg is what we called of the church history tour, which means we're going to focus really on kind of New England, basically Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. And then I'm sure the next year we're going to focus on Illinois and Missouri, but it makes it that we can dive in a little bit deeper and not be so rushed. And of course, right now the Kirtland Temple is a hot commodity in the church right now.
That's a bonus. That's the fourth temple that we'll get to go in.
Right. And Janie, as you and I know in the past, our access to that temple had been very limited. I think the last church history tour you and I did there, we had to meet on the back lawn on wooden benches because we weren't even allowed to go in.
This is going to be exciting.
So this will be really cool. Yeah, this is going to be really cool.
So it's going to be great. Come join us. Come, if you have any questions, it's going to be a wonderful experience.
Once again, email us again at preservingfamiliespodcast@gmail.com.
And the company that we work with is Journeyings. They are very awesome. They're so great to work with. They're very honest. They get back to you. They're very hands-on. So
yeah, Reed and Diane Robinson run that. Reed was a BYU professor for years. They've been mission presidents twice. This is just a powerful couple that will be with us.
They lead tours all over the world, and this is one that we're going to do with them. So
yeah, it'll be really fun.
So it's a very reliable company.
Yeah, we love them. For our topic today, we want to talk about, I call it mental toughness. Janie may call it mental strength. But we want to talk about what we can do to help our children, our adolescents, our young single adults, our grandchildren, be more what we would call mentally tough. And I think a great place to start Janie, would be this book that I'm pulling out right here, which we recommend to all of you. It's called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness by Jonathan Haidt. Great, great book. One of the things he says at the opening of this book is that his central claim to the book is focused on these two trends. Number one, overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world. He says those are the major reasons why children born after 1995 have become what he calls the anxious generation. And this is not something that has escaped us as members of the church. Not too long ago, Elder D. Todd Christofferson spoke at a very special meeting to the Seminary and Institute personnel in January of 2024. So just a few months ago, beginning of this year. And by the way, if you type in the title of his talk, Trust in God, January 2024, you'll be able to pull this up. But let me share with you the concerns of Elder Christofferson, which I think mirror the concerns of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. He said, I'd like to speak to a concern that seems to plague us as never before in our younger generations. I am referring to very real feelings of anxiety and depression and the bitter fruit that these feelings can engender, including, at the extreme, substance abuse, self-harm, and even suicide. Here are a few statistics, he says. Now, globally, between 2004 and 2021, reports of clinical depression among teenagers rose from 13% to 30%, basically 29.2% for females, and from 5% to 11.5% for males. So cutting out of Elder Christofferson for a minute, obviously those statistics reflect what statistics have always shown for the last 30 or 40 years, and that's that girls suffer more from depression-type symptoms than boys, or women more than men. Among teenagers from 12 to 17 years of age, 21% had experienced a major depressive episode at least once in their life, and 15% in that past year. These figures do not take into account the lesser but significant challenge of non-clinical depression and anxiety that many more suffer. In fact, according to WebMD, nearly 60% of those who suffer from anxiety also suffer from depression. We call that in the field comorbidity, which means if you have one ailment, you are likely to have another ailment at the same time. Now, here's the important part of Elder Christofferson's talk in my mind that's so helpful, because what a lot of you may be aware of, maybe not, but the church is always doing research. The church conducts research all the time. That research is kept private. It's shared among the general authorities, and I'm sure a few select others, so most of us aren't aware of it. But the church conducted a study globally in 2018 among LDS teenagers. Here's the interesting thing about what we're about to share with you. The study was conducted in 2018. Post-COVID is going to jack the numbers up even more that I'm about to share. But in 2018, 29% of LDS youth struggle with clinical levels of anxiety. 29%. That's almost a third. Of course, this varies by country. It may not be representative of all youth in each country, but the figures for clinical anxiety was, for example, listen close, this is fascinating, this is LDS youth data. 28% of LDS youth in the United States, 32% in Chile, 16% in France and Belgium. South Africa, 46%. That's almost half of all youth in that country who struggle with anxiety. Taiwan, 18%, and New Zealand, 32%. And once again, I'm sure those numbers are even higher now that we're in this post-COVID era.
Wow. And now Elder Christofferson said, of course, many factors may contribute to or be associated with the development of depression and anxiety. In some cases, there could be genetic factors at work. There are also a number of external factors that can play a role, such as adversity, including trauma and neglect, exposure to stress, parenting styles, sexual orientation, peer and social group influence, school factors, temperament, among others, he says. Then he says, one relatively new factor associated with the increased prevalence of anxiety and depression is social media use.
Wow.
Which, again, back to the book that you just recommended, The Anxious Generation. That's
Right.
his whole premise.
Yeah, how did he say it? That underprotection in the virtual world and overprotection in the real world
Is the huge problem of why the
kind of use
huge
catalyst,
numbers
right? The
of
catalyst
anxiety and
driving all this.
depression. Yeah. This has drawn the attention of and warnings from the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General. In the United States, it's estimated that 95% of teenagers have social media links, with nearly 2/3 using social media every day. Studies have found that these teenagers spend an average of 3.5 hours per day on social media. I bet that's a low average.
Right.
And report that that it negatively affects their self-perceptions. There are certain patterns of online engagement that predict negative outcomes, like cyberbullying, sexting, doom scrolling, for example. Doom scrolling, by the way, for those of you who, like me, have never heard of it, refers to spending long periods of time on one's phone or computer focusing on negative news stories. Apparently, for some, this habit is compulsive and somehow darkly comforting. Passive uses of social media, that is, spending time reviewing social media content aimlessly, increases feelings of inferiority and negative comparison, while active or purposeful social media use, such as posting, commenting, and connecting, does not have that same negative association.
Wow.
Now, this is all from Elder Christofferson, a prophet.
Right. Prophet, seer, and revelator.
Yeah.
I think, Janie, I'm going to go back to something you read, but he says there are a number of other factors that can, cause or be catalysts for anxiety and depression. And he said those factors could include exposure to stress, parenting styles, sexual orientation. I mean, he's hitting everything: peer and social group influence, temperament, and then he goes into, as you said, social media. But I think the two that we're probably going to focus on a little bit today are going to be social media for sure, but also parenting styles. It's part of our belief is that neglectful parenting or permissive parenting is at the root of a lot of these issues that plague us today. We're going to talk about how to help our children become more mentally strong, more mentally tough. And it's going to be really difficult to do that if we have what I would call kind of permissive or passive or helicopter type parents. Janie, for me, it's just always mind-blowing when I see some of this coddling parenting taking place. In my mind, I'm actually thinking, do parents, I hope I can say this the right way, but are they recognizing that type of coddling is not going to prepare their children and youth for the world that we're living in and entering into today? That is so tough out, it's so tough out there, and we're experiencing all kinds of chaos and calamity. And I'm thinking, really? I mean, I don't think this passive parenting is going to prepare youth for what lies ahead before them.
Well, and I think it comes from a place of love. I think parents do see the world as hard and scary, and they want to protect their children and bubble wrap them and keep them safe from everything, all the hardships maybe that they had to go through or that they perceive is out there. Right. And so they want to protect and keep and do all their children's battles for them. But what does that do? It makes very weak children that aren't prepared to go in the real world, that have no skills, that have no backbone, that have no strength, that have no confidence or self-worth to be able to be a grown adult. And that's the problem that we're really seeing right now.
Right. So should we kind of talk about helicopter parenting just for a minute?
Yeah, so I guess for those of you that aren't familiar or haven't heard that word, helicopter parenting is a term used to describe parents who are overly involved and protective in their children's lives. Helicopter parents may hover over their children's every move, never take eyes off of them, have to make sure that, they know where they are every second, what they're doing. They remove obstacles to ensure their children's success and protection. And this parenting style can be well-intentioned, like we just talked about, but it's also very interfering with a child's development and ability to thrive later in life.
So Janie, it's really interesting because this is something we were talking about, 10 and 15 years ago. We don't talk about it as much today, but it's still there. Sometimes as a college professor, we see parents getting involved in their children's grades and issues at school. We've heard people telling stories. I've even read out of USA Today where children were bringing their parents to job interviews after they had graduated from college. Parents getting involved with realtors, as their married children are buying their first homes. So this movement is still around, and once again, it's one that the outcomes, that's what we're really focused on. Where those outcomes lead is not super helpful when your parents are just overprotective and micromanaging every move that you make. Now, another thought is that as a country, we are prescribing medicine like crazy right now, right? To solve every problem. 21 million prescriptions written every year for ADD type of medicines. 400% increase in stimulant drug prescriptions over the past decade. A 330% increase in antidepressant drug use in children over the past decade. I know, Janie, one that you and I talked about is how children now don't play, right? There's just this lack of playtime. And I don't know if you remember, but my memory growing up in the 1960s and 70s is you knocked on the next door neighbor's door and you said, "Can Johnny play?"
Right. And again, the research right out of
Jonathan
Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, which again, we're asking all of you to get because it's an incredible book.
Right.
That's his whole premise, that we have now gone from play-based to a phone-based generation where kids used to go out and play kickball and play sports in the yard or go explore the woods or ride bikes up and down the street. Kids don't do that anymore because their parents are afraid that they're going to get kidnapped or molested or whatever.
And by the way, we're not saying that those things can't happen. But maybe we've gone too far.
Right, but he disputes how the image that the media has portrayed is way overblown and that it's basically ruined a generation of children who are now, their parents keep them inside. They play on screens, whether it be computers, phones, tablets, whatever. And
versus climbing trees and
right, and how critical the actual play and being outside is for children and their development.
Right. In fact, we read that over 40,000 U.S. schools have eliminated recess. And by the way, that data is about 10 years old now, so I'm sure that it's a lot higher than 40,000. But
when I hear my grandkids say, "Oh, our teachers took play recess away from us today because we were being naughty or that we were talking too much, or at lunch they made us all put our heads down," which made me so mad with my own children growing up.
Yeah.
Like, teachers, do you understand children at all? Do you understand? And I know they're trying to keep control of 500 children, but kids need to be outside. They need to be running, playing, using their bodies, especially little boys need to get that energy and exercise out.
Well, it's funny, Janie, because I can look back on elementary school. I don't think I remember one thing that was ever taught to me ever, but I remember recess and the social interaction and the friendships and
again, they're interacting, they're learning to get along and
work together.
We have a grandson in Arkansas, and if there's any contention or fighting among the boys, they take their balls away. And they'll for like weeks and say, "You can't play football, you can't play basketball, you can't play anything if you guys are fighting." But that's how kids learn. That's how they learn how to interact and get along and set rules. And and again, I'm looking at these administrators like, do you know anything about children? Anyway, sorry for my rant, but
but I even think of in my day and in your day, and a lot of parents who are listening to this episode today will remember this, but there was a dinner bell. I mean, our mom is ringing a dinner bell to call us inside because we didn't want to come inside, right? We didn't want to have to stop what we were doing with all of our friends out in the neighborhood to have to come back inside. But
now we're like pushing the kids out. Please go out. Just go outside for a little while, okay? Yeah. Just go. But they're just glued to their screens.
Yeah, they resist that sometimes. Janie, a few years ago, I read a book, and some probably would not like the book. They wouldn't like the title. But it was called A Nation of Wimps. Janie's holding it in her hand right now. We still have it here. But Hera Morano, a great scholar, wrote this, that overprotected and overmanaged by their parents, and with few challenges, all their own through which to sharpen their instincts and identities, kids are unable to forge their own unique adaptations to the normal vicissitudes of life. That not only makes them extraordinarily risk-averse, It makes them psychologically fragile. And in the process, they're robbed of identity, meaning, and a sense of mastery, which underlies real happiness. Janie, right now I'm thinking of Elder Christofferson's story of those sheep. When he's a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old boy and they're raising sheep on their little family farm, and they have 13 baby lambs born one night in a blizzard, and he's able to be coached by his grandfather on how to save all those lambs, and calls his dad, who's out of town the next day, to report that all the lambs are accounted for. And Elder Christofferson then made this great point. He says, I think doing hard things is what really builds a kid's self-worth and self-esteem. Not being told they're wonderful and amazing, but by doing hard things. So now let me continue the quote. Forget too about perseverance. Not simply a moral virtue, but a necessary life skill. We today, in this podcast episode, are teaching that perseverance, grit, and mental toughness are necessary life skills for this upcoming generation. It's just not a cool quality to have or not have. It's a matter of life or death, maybe. And whether we're aware of it or not, back to Hera Morano, we're on our way to creating a nation of wimps. Now, I know once again she's saying something very strong there that some would not want to hear, but that's what's going on.
But Mark, when you look back at our nation and how our nation was founded, our nation was not founded on people who were scared and who were frightened. I mean, I'm sure they did experience fear, but these people were tough physically, mentally, emotionally. They had a work ethic. I mean, when you think back of our founding fathers that created this nation, when you think about our early church leaders who came from all these countries, came to America, walked across the plains, built cities, built roads, built bridges.
Dug canals,
Right? And I know this is different times. I know things have changed, but I feel like sometimes parents want to eliminate everything that made them tough. So as I look around, we see so many successful people who have built companies, who have built homes, have great careers,
have built great wealth in their life.
But then they want to take that away from their children. Exactly what made them successful in life, they want to eliminate for their kids. So they want to take all pain away.
Janie, what you're saying reminds me of a couple things that Elder Stanley Ellis said a few years ago in General Conference, where he gave a talk entitled, Do We Trust Him? Hard is Good. And he said, hard makes us stronger, humbles us, and gives us a chance to prove ourselves. Just like you talked about, Janie, he said our beloved handcart pioneers came to know God in their extremities. The hard things in life, he said, should come as no surprise. One of the earliest covenants we make with the Lord is to live the law of sacrifice. And then he said hard is also part of the gospel plan. And one of the purposes of this life is for us to be proven. I think this is so good. And then he just gives some great examples. But then he said this, and this is his story. Before this calling, I was a financial consultant in Houston, Texas, and most of my work was with multimillionaires who own their own businesses. Almost all of them had created their successful businesses from nothing through lots of hard work. The saddest thing for me was to hear some of them say that they wanted to make it easier for their children. They did not want their children to suffer as they had. In other words, they would deprive their children of the very thing that had made them successful. Honey, I think that's exactly what you're talking about. Anyway, so yeah, we don't, or in other words, to remove hard and difficult things from our children's lives is not going to equip them or prepare them for the world that they're going to face. We've got to help them to do hard things and become mentally tough.
Right. And Marcus, we're kind of just ending up here talking about wimpy parents or helicopter parents or permissive parents.
Right.
And here's again our case against this. And I don't know why this is a passion of mine, but I really study this and watch this, from people that I see. And no matter, so wimpy, permissive parents, it really does come from a place of being well-intentioned. They really do love their children. They want to give them everything, do everything for them, hand everything to them on a silver platter. But these poor parents, in return, they expect their children to appreciate their efforts. But what they do is they find out that instead their children almost resent them. They grow up resenting them. And instead of cooperating, their kids argue with them. And instead of respecting them, their kids continue to do what they've been told not to do. And instead of being satisfied and grateful, these kids become demanding. They become princesses and princesses, where they don't want to do anything. They just expect everything to be handed from their parents. And so it's really a recipe for disaster. In every case that I've seen, it's this way. The kids, instead of being grateful that their parents do so much for them, they really do become resentful of their parents.
It's like literally ironic. We use the word ironic wrong most of the time, but this is a case where it's literally ironic, where some of these children we've seen actually grew up resenting their own parents who gave them so much.
And you would think parents that are harder on their kids, that make them work and have chores and have regulations, that they would be the ones hating their parents, but they're the ones that respect and love their parents. Isn't that ironic? It really is. Authoritative parents have a closer relationship almost, because kids need boundaries. Kids need to know where the limits are. That's what they look to for their parents. These parents that just are like free reign, no rules, you do you. The kids get really lost, and it's almost kind of frightening to them to have no boundaries or no rules in their life.
Right. No, I think most of us could look back on the way that we were parented back in the 60s and 70s and even earlier, right? Even earlier, those parented in the 40s and the 50s who may listen to this episode. And there's gratitude for parents who did expect us to do hard things. And I know, Janie, I know that there's such a movement today to be a gentle, to be a kind and loving parent. We would never tell anyone not to do that. That has to be part of the equation, no question about it. But if that's not coupled with high expectations, then it fails. In fact, the research shows over and over again that when parents are permissive, the outcomes for their children are not great. As adults, they're struggling. And so one of my favorite eras back in the 1990s with Jeff Foxworthy was, you're a redneck if. And he had all these great things like if you mow your lawn and find a car, and if you have a Velvet Elvis painting hanging on your wall. And so now we're going to have, you're a permissive parent if. Ready? Number 1, you have a hard time being the boss of your home. In fact, your children don't even believe that you're in charge in your own home. Number 2, that you give in to your children too often. You find yourself doing that. It just is easier, right? Okay, they're screaming, they're having a fit.
Well, you're afraid they won't like you.
Yeah.
Or they're going to have a temper tantrum.
Or I don't want to have them to have this temper tantrum in the store, so here's your candy bar or whatever. When it comes to disciplining, number 3, maybe you talk too much. Maybe you give a lot of lectures and speeches, but there's not a lot of consequences for the choices.
Well, I've seen parents trying to negotiate with a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old has no cognitive ability whatsoever to reason why they shouldn't be having a meltdown or why they shouldn't be getting a candy bar in the store.
My favorite one is when we ask them, why did you do that? And the answer is, they have no idea. They don't know. I don't even know why I do stupid things at age 60, right? But anyway. Number 4, maybe you're too patient. And I know we always love to say that patience is a virtue, but over patience can allow inappropriate behaviors. Number 5, and this was a big one, a huge one I see, are you inconsistent? Or in other words, on one hand, those children could be, nailed for misbehaving, but then on the same misbehavior 20 minutes later or the next day, it's not even...
it's just totally overlooked.
Yeah, so inconsistency.
Because the mom doesn't want to deal with it, or so they never know what they're going to get from moment to moment.
Right. Number 6, do you take too much abuse from your children? And by the way, Janie, you have your pet peeves and I have mine, but we can never as parents allow our children to verbally or physically abuse us as parents. And if you're a dad, for the dads out there, if your children are talking back or calling names or being physical with your wife, it's time to put your John Wayne outfit on, right? And you got to stand up for your spouse, and I see more and more kind of laid back dads on that one today. Man, if in our home, our kids knew that if Janie, they talked to you the wrong way or that they were going to have to deal with me. I was just not patient with that one at all. But Your favorite quote, I think, is that it's probably okay for children to have a healthy fear of their father. Healthy fear is the key word, whatever that really means. But I wanted my kids to know that if they ever messed with mom, that was going to be game over real fast. We were not going to tolerate that behavior in our home. So no parent should be abused by their children. And then number 7, do we save our children from the consequences of their choices? Are we always rushing in to protect and save? I would say number 8 is, do we feel like our children or a child is running our lives, that our whole life kind of revolves around them? That's probably not a good sign. Do our children, I guess this would be number 9, do they rarely take no for an answer? We tell them no, and they just
come back at every angle.
Oh man, they do not stop. They're just relentless, right? And they know that they can just wear you down over time, and there's got to be a way.
And eventually, they're going to break you, and you're going to say yes.
Yeah, you're going to cave in at some point. Number 10, does the thought of making your child unhappy cause you to hold back when it comes to discipline? Oh my gosh, I would never want to make. I still remember that mother who said when we told her, maybe you need to punish your son. And she said, oh, no, that would just make him mad. We can't do that.
Or we've had parents and friends afraid to take their cell phones away from their kids because, oh, no, I could never do that. They would fall apart. Yeah. There's a problem there.
That's a big problem, right? Another one, do you frequently do your children's homework or other work for them? How about this one? Do you have to ask them 10, 15, 20 times to do something? That was one, Janie, that we really tried hard on, is when we spoke once, that they were expected to obey at that point and not.
We've talked about that before. We teach our children fractions where we count 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. Right. No, I should ask you one time to go get your shoes, and that should be it.
Here's another one. Are you embarrassed in public by your child's behavior? And some people are. In fact, I've heard even some people say, I don't even want to take my kids out to a restaurant or in public because I'm worried about how they may act. Do you dread mornings because you know that your child hates to wake up, and they're going to ruin your entire day before it even starts? Do you worry that any mistake you make as a parent will permanently damage your child for the rest of their lives? And the last one, do you find that no matter how much you do for your child, they still want more? Or in other words...
and demand more of you.
They demand more, they expect more, and they're ungrateful. They're just... That was another one, Janie, I think for you and I, that was a hot button for us. But when we ever sensed a lack of gratitude, that was not going
we were going to have some teaching moments.
We're going to have a come to Jesus meeting, right? So this is from Madeline Levine, as we kind of transition out of that. Are you, a permissive parent? But she said many children today from affluent homes have not had the opportunity to work on self-management skills because parents are quick to limit their child's frustration and distress. In other words, they're not even having to work through problems now. We're taking their problems away from them. Parents who are harried and preoccupied can be too willing to reduce consequences and capitulate to demands rather than stand their ground. It is difficult to deny our children their wants and their desires, whether it's the toddler desperate for candy at the supermarket checkout line or the teen insisting that her life is over if she can't buy the latest fashion accessory. However, and this is the painful psychological truth, our primary responsibility is not to gratify our children, which of course we often do and happily, but to make certain that they develop a repertoire of skills that will help them meet life's inevitable challenges and disappointments. And I think that is the key for our whole podcast episode today is, are we equipping our children with a repertoire of skills that are going to help them meet the challenges of life? By the way, everyone, I know it's almost 20 years old now, but Madeline Levine's book, The Price of Privilege, is another great book for parents. A lot of great research in there on what parents can do to strengthen and to fortify and to help their children to become resilient and strong and mentally tough.
Mark, in this next slide that we've created, I love the meme that you have here. It's this mom out mowing the lawn while her son she looks behind and he's laying in a hammock drinking a lemonade.
Yeah.
And the caption says, "No, I can't get you another lemonade. I still have to deliver your newspapers and finish your homework."
Yeah. Oh
and
my
again,
gosh,
we
how
see
true.
that so much. We see parents that just hover that, okay, pull out all your homework. And they go over every aspect. They're online, checking their grades every moment, talking to every teacher, handling all their problems, fighting every battle for them. And it's just, people, how are your kids ever going to grow? By you doing everything.
Yeah. Once again, if that's back to that, quote we just read, that if our prime responsibility as a parent is to make certain that they develop skills that are going to help them meet the challenges of life and the disappointments, that's not going to do it.
They can't do it by just watching you do it.
Right.
So again, another quote by Madeline Levine, The Price of Privilege. A child cannot possibly develop resilience when his parents are constantly at his side, interfering with the development of autonomy, self-management, and coping skills.
Yeah. Amen.
It's not going to happen. We can be by their side, coaching them and helping them, teaching them how to be organized, teaching them how to go talk to their teacher, pushing them to make the phone call, pushing them to go get the job, but we can't be there, doing it for them.
Right.
They're never going to develop the skills necessary. Elder Maxwell said, those who do too much for their children will soon find that they can do nothing with their children. So many children have been so much done for that they are almost done in.
I call that prophecy, because that was given in 1975, that, once again, if we do too much for their children and they've had so much done for them, now they're almost done in. There it is.
Literally cripples children. Parents that hover and do everything, their kids are literally crippled. They can't function.
Right. And we see that, right? We see that on missions. We see that in college. We see that in all walks of life, in their marriages and family life, where they have not acquired the coping skills to deal with difficulties and challenges.
So now they can't go to college. They can't get homework turned in. They can't go on missions. They can't even survive in marriages. They can't do anything. They can't hold a job.
They can't do anything that's hard. And once again, we want to make it very clear. We are not talking about everyone here. This is not a global pandemic. We're talking about, a certain small percentage of, and maybe that percentage is getting larger, but of children who are being raised this way, and it's just going to ruin them in their later life.
And one more from Madeline Levine, because it's so good. By allowing them, our children, to get occasionally bruised in childhood, we are helping to make certain that they don't get broken in adolescence. And parents, that is such a huge
Right.
thing. Like, letting their children have hard times, letting them learn skills early on, helping them participate in chores early on, things like that will teach them actual self-worth, give them skills, give them coping skills, letting them fight their own battles with their little friends, helping them play outside, all those kind of things, so that in adolescence they can handle the big trials that come.
Right.
And by allowing them in their failures in adolescence, we are helping them to lay the groundwork for success in adulthood, she continues. But that is so huge and important.
Well, I think, Janie, in our own lives, we can look back and see some failures. We can look back and see plenty of, games not won. You didn't make the tryouts. You didn't win the election. You didn't get the grade you were hoping for in that class. Just hard things. Not to mention those who have severe trials, like a friend of mine whose house burned down, or
a parent dying,
someone
or
died
a health issue.
Yeah, I mean, those are the big ones, but once again, I look back now and recognize that, I remember working all day on a Pinewood Derby car, and you know how now we get an award for, not that we have that program anymore, but there was an award for there was 500 categories. You were sure to win one of them, even if it was the craziest looking car. But I remember you got one shot at it. You raced down the tracks. I remember losing and walking home with my orange car that I painted, and I remember just being so disappointed because other people just kept going all night with their cars that were winning. But that teaches you. You learn a lot about life when you lose. Not that we want to make a habit of losing, but those lessons are profound. Look what President McKay said. He said that there is no development of character without resistance, And we know that. And that's something that we know. And yet sometimes we forget that as we're raising our children, that if we want them to develop character and strength, they have to have opposition and resistance. And
we cannot take those away from them. It's good. As painful as it is to watch our children suffer or to go through hard things or to come home crying because a friend was mean or having, whatever it is, it's painful. But But that's how we teach them how to get through things so that then again in their adolescence, in their adult life, then they have the skills to know how to get through hard things.
Right. And then this great quote from President Benson, and he said that while I do not believe in stepping out of the path of duty to pick up a cross that I don't need, he said, we are cowardly if we refuse to pick up a cross that lies right in our path. And then he said this, no cross, no crown, no gall, no glory, no thorns, no throne. Once again, this great lesson of what opposition and trials and challenges can do to develop us and to help us become the strong people that the Lord needs us to become. So Janie, we've said it before, we'll say it again, I'm sure we will, but of those 3 or 4 key parenting styles, when you think of authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. The authoritative, what is it? It's high on warmth, which means high on relationship, high on connection, but also high on demand and expectation. That our children are going to have chores, they're going to have responsibilities, they're going to have expectations.
They're going to be part of the family. They're going to be respectful. Right. They're going to participate. We're going to work as a team. They're going to obey rules.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be some management there.
That's what the authoritative family looks like.
Yeah.
But again, high on warmth. Yeah. Lots of love. Lots of fun.
Yeah.
Lots of togetherness. Lots of enjoyment.
I think some don't realize that as parents that you can have both. You can have high expectations for your kids and you can have a blast. And I mean, I think if there are any 2 rules that I look back on in our own family, we wanted our children to be the hardest workers that they knew. We wanted them to work hard and be tough and be strong. But we also wanted to have fun, and fun was a big part of our family culture, I think, anyway.
Well, I love that. I think we really did believe in work hard, play hard. I think we really did.
So here's what we would say about this. This authoritative style, high on warmth, high on demand, yields the greatest outcomes for our youth. Socially, they're strong and capable. Academically, research tells us that they perform at a high level. Even spiritually, they're engaged in their religions. Research shows that mentally, that these are strong young people. They're resilient. They perform at high levels.
They've gone through hard things, so they know how to get through hard things.
Right. They can do hard things. And so once again, the research is absolutely clear. And when compared to those other parenting styles, those are the children that have a lot of mental health issues. They struggle with controlling their own emotions and passions and managing themselves, so to speak. They end up engaged in substance abuse and other things like that. And so once again, there's a lot of validity as we think about how crucial this parenting style is.
And if children are raised that way in an authoritative home, not 100%, but the outcome is very high.
The outcomes,
These children will have trust and hope sufficient to withstand rebuffs and disappointments because they've gone through it. They've done it all their life.
Yeah.
And they know that they can get through it. They've had experiences with trials and issues. They're able to keep trying after failure.
They don't give up.
They don't give up. They forgive and forget. They know that life goes on, that they can do hard things. They can delay gratification because they've haven't been handed everything. And they also learn how to work for things and be grateful for things.
Right.
They can adapt to differing conditions in several environments. So they're used to dealing and rolling with change and things that come their way. So they're more adaptable. And then they have a capacity to cope and feel confident that they can do that and confident that they can get through things because, again...
They know that they can do hard things. Right?
And they have supportive family and supportive parents around them that have helped walk them and coach them through it. Not do it for them, but helped teach them how to get through these things. And so that's what we're looking for. That's what builds resilient and, gritty and
children that can face the world head on and make a difference and be leaders and can help others, can help inspire others. So what we've done is we've set ourselves up, I think, in a good way for our next episode, where then we're going to talk about the practices of the mentally tough, the mentally strong, those who persevere, those who have grit.
So what we can do as parents on an everyday basis to teach our kids these skills.
To teach these skills, and these principles. So we will do that next time. But for this time, when it comes to let's do something, LDS.
So I think for LDS, we can go back and listen to the 17 or 16 steps or 16 quiz on
16 kind of questions.
Are we a permissive parent?
Right.
And I know looking back when I was a parent, I mean, I'm sure several times I gave in and was like, whatever, just take it, just to put out fires.
Sure.
Or...
I mean, we want everyone to know that we messed up plenty. Every day we had a mess up, right? So, of course, we probably could have pled guilty to every one of those 17 things at one time or another, right?
Right, but maybe there's a place where we can improve, that we can tighten up, that we can, like we used to call it, sometimes we felt like the monkeys were running the zoo, and we as parents, had kind of lost control. And I think there's times where we need to tighten up the reins, step back up, take control, and put things back together. Anyway, so that would be my invitation, is just, pick something on that list maybe that we can work on as parents.
I think that's great. So anyone, if you want the list, we can give it to you. If you want any notes or any of these great quotes that we are using today, we are happy to share them with you. Just email us at preservingfamilypodcast@gmail.com. And once again, if you're interested in our church history trip the first week of August of 2025, let us know about that as well. We'll fill you in with all the information that we have.
And if there's somebody, again, that can use this, that there's somebody that maybe a child of yours, an adult child that is trying to parent permissively, maybe you could help them with giving them some of these books or resources on why permissive parenting does not work. And all the studies and research shows it.
Yeah.
And so, if there's...
We're sure you'll do that in a very loving way.
If there's any resources or anything, we're happy to help or send books or quotes or resources or references. So,
yeah. Thanks,
please
everyone.
pass it along.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being with us. And we look forward to being with you next time. Have a great week.